Things go better with rock. The only time I turn it down is when I'm sleeping it off. Turn up the radio. This is the Community Solutions Podcast. Jason Bradley, Andrew Richter, episode 100. We made it. We're alive. They didn't take us out. They didn't send anybody to come hunt us down.
Not yet.
Not yet. How you doing, Andrew?
We're in the 3 digits. How do you like that? Starting in your basement.
Yeah.
Our first episode and off to where we are a couple years later. It's been a fun ride. I mean, in a way, it seems like 100 years that we've been doing this, and in a way, it seems like 2 weeks.
Right.
So.
Well, you know, we keep learning new things all the time, and it has been quite a wild ride. I mean, you think about this from, 10 plus years ago when we started, meeting in a basement with a bunch of people saying, what the heck is wrong with our city? Why don't they listen to us? You know, and what it has grown into in finding out that the same stuff is happening everywhere across the state.
Yeah, that's been a little depressing. On the other hand, it's been a little, on the other hand, it's nice to know you're not alone.
Right.
And then on the other hand, well, wait a minute, I've run out of hands. No, I mean, by the way,
yeah.
Before we go on,
Yeah.
Turn Up the Radio. That's an 80s song.
Yes.
And I've heard it a million times.
Yes.
And I have no idea who sings it. But this is episode 100.
Yeah.
So I need a good hint.
A good hint. John Hancock.
Okay, John Hancock is famous for his signature, right? So it's the. Am I gonna be angry after you tell me?
I don't know. They were a one-hit wonder, pretty much in the States, anyways.
Oh, well then
they're from like Germany, I think.
Well, then I don't have any clue.
Or autograph. Yes.
I'd have never gotten that in 5 million guesses. So
Yeah.
Good thing we just got rid of that. So
Yeah.
Autograph. Anyway, back to episode 100. No, it's been fun. I definitely want to send out a thank you to our growing audience, to the people who listen, who go on the Facebook, share the posts, follow us on Twitter, the Podbabble people that have put us on, and all the other stuff that you do that I don't understand.
Yeah.
It's been, what we're going to talk about today, I think is a special thing, I think, for the audience, because what we're going to talk about basically is how we're able to do this and how we couldn't do this and how much previously and how much things have changed over the past 10, 20, just in our lifetime, really, just in our adult lifetime.
Yeah.
On this. Bob Davis is coming up on the show. I'll spill the beans.
Yeah.
And
podcasting and radio legend here
absolutely,
in the cities.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, I listened to Bob when he was with Tom Emmer, and not all the time, but and I listened to Bob when he did his own show. And now he has his own podcast, and he's probably bigger than he's ever been.
Yeah.
So the podcasting world has changed a lot of things. Technology, generally speaking, has changed a lot of things. I think the good outweighs the bad. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think decentralization is ever a bad thing.
No. And getting rid of oligopoly control over who has a voice on something, I think, is a good thing as well. I mean, it's podcasters, I think, are thought less of by, the people who supposedly are the professionals
right.
of this, obviously. But, they're the dinosaurs in this business.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, and there was a time where, like I've said before, journalism is pretty much dead in this country, and freedom of the press. You could question whether we really have that.
I would say that are they free? Sure. Government doesn't usually.
Okay, are they though? I mean, when somebody gives an opinion on the radio and they're fired for it, or somebody threatens their advertisers.
Well, and that's where I'm going.
Is that freedom of speech?
I think it's not coming from government so much as it is the people that own and run these networks.
Right.
So
they still hold a lot of power. I mean, even though there's more of them than there used to be.
Right.
I mean, when you had the big three, and you had radio, which 4 companies owned all the major stations, Disney,
Right.
Clear Channel. I mean, you had total control in the hands of a few. Now you have a lot of control in the hands of some.
Yes.
People like Ted Turner, Rupert Murdoch, people like that have gone into this business in the last 25 years or so. And, it's freedom of speech is not freedom from opinions you don't like. And so
Right.
it's when are we going to get that message down? Maybe?
Exactly.
But that's
It's
what spawned,
protecting unpopular speech no matter who says it.
right? But that's what spawned the podcasting. I mean,
Yeah.
Don Imus, remember the controversy he got in with the basketball team or
Yeah.
whatever? I can't remember the specifics of it. He went right into podcasting, and his whole audience just went with him.
Yeah.
I mean, then he can go there and say whatever he wants to.
Right.
I mean, but it's just interesting how much it's shifted. And, what's the future hold? And it's going to be a great conversation, I think, with Bob about that because he's worked through this.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have lived through it. And it's just a great perspective, I think, that he's going to bring. So it's a good treat for us.
I believe it is going to be a fantastic episode 100. So why don't we just dive right into it?
No kidding.
All right, Bob
Listen
Davis.
to us enough. Let's just bring Bob in. Right now.
All right, we'll be back with Bob Davis in one moment. Here we are, episode 100. And yeah, he's excited. Our guest, of course, is none other than Bob Davis from the Bob Davis Podcasts. He's not only out there on the BobDavisPodcasts.com, but you can also go find him on all your favorite podcast apps. We'll have him give a rundown later, so that
and if you're like me, those are the things on your phone, right? The
yes,
apps. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And we'll have a long conversation about that because some people still can't understand that the phone is not just for making a telephone call.
That is correct.
All right, now enough talking about me here.
Well, welcome, Bob. It's been a while.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe.
Odd for me to say, hey, thanks for having.
I think last time we were on your
we saw each
podcast.
other-
but-
Yeah, and then the last time we saw each other was at the in the Edmund Fitzgerald room at the Republican convention in Duluth,
That is true. Yes.
which I got a huge kick out of.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Exactly
interesting.
What happened? They went down with the whole crew.
Yeah, and I have to say that was our first experience covering that as a journalist. I had spent
That's right.
I had spent the previous 10 years as somebody getting those phone calls from all the candidates every 5 minutes for months. It was interesting to attend it with, I didn't have a horse in the race.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way. It's when you're not advocating, you can really see what's going on.
I'll never be a delegate again. Even when I
Well,
run for governor, I won't be a delegate again. So, I'm done doing that. I've served my time.
Delegate. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's my thing. I've served my time.
Well,
Yeah.
you certainly put your time in, and I think that's really important. And so you've done it, and you don't need to do it again, right?
I'm all for that.
Oh, well, it's good to have you on the show. We don't do a ton of guests, and I know, like you, often do your podcast. It's just kind of your thoughts out there. Once in a while, you'll have somebody on, but so this is kind of something that we both. I don't know. It's a little different path for us. So
Yeah, it's an interesting show, though. Sometimes you have to bring in people, other people, and get their perspective. And with the subject matter we're talking about, I think Bob is one of the best guests we could have for it.
Well, that's great. One of the big problems with podcasters is they all, what you guys have learned to do in 100 Podcasts is to do a show by yourselves. And one of the biggest problems with podcasters is it's going to be great. We're going to get together and I'm going to do this. And then they do a couple podcasts and they think, oh, we've got to have guests on. And so suddenly then, the lawn man is on with or
Yeah, and
Hello?
that is, I think, a huge deal. And learning to be able to do a show on your own and give your thoughts. I mean, people like to hear guests. They like to hear, other people's point of view and to mix it up. But I think that you're right. When you are relying on guests, it just kind of proves that as a host,
You're not that interesting.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to put people down. I'm
No.
just saying it takes a while to learn how to do your own thing, and just having people, state legislators and everybody else on. I used to get in trouble at the radio station, because they would say, "Well, we want to have so and so state legislator on," and I used to say, "What's he going to say?" Well, he's a state legislator and he wants to come on. I said, I don't care if he wants to come on. Well, you don't turn down a politician that wants to come on your show. Oh, yes, I do. Because what they have to say, I can say better than them, or they have no business being on the show for whatever reason. Just because they're a state legislator doesn't mean they get access to, media.
right. And that's why you're on this podcast today.
That's why I'm a podcaster, is because they got tired of me causing them problems all the time. But in terms of quality, I'd rather have you guys go through the changes of learning to do really good local podcasts than have you be forced to have, some state legislating hack on who is not going to say anything because they can't. I had Steve Draskowski on recently to talk about this Gang of Four in the House. And I really had to push him. He goes, well, I don't want to dish any dirt. And I said, Steve, that's what we're here for. We're here to dish dirt. Come on, baby.
Yeah,
with these guys in the state legislature.
Well, that Gang of Four
Turns out he's a child, okay? And he if you guys don't reelect me, I'm going to quit in December and leave. And everybody that I know said, why did you just say, the door, see you later? Instead, they said, oh, no, please don't quit, Mr. Dow. You're amazing. And they basically catered to that man as a child.
Well, nobody's better at being in the minority than Republicans
one
are.
who are good.
Oh, yeah. I just have no interest in I think, walking that road ourselves.
No, not at all.
But just because, podcasts are as vast as the stars. And why don't you give us a little bit? I know, we know your history. I know there are a lot of people that will probably tune in that know your history, but this is the podcast universe. And I want to make sure that hopefully we can turn some people onto your show that didn't know about you already. Why don't you give us a little bit of background on what you've done in media and why you're qualified to speak about this? Okay.
So I've been in media since I was 12, which is a long time ago. At least 10 years. So
it's going to guess 15, but we'll go with your numbers.
When I was 12, I had my first real job as a news writer at 15, and I've done everything you can do in radio. I've been fired 100 times for causing trouble and not causing trouble, or just because they decide that they're going to go country, or whatever the situation is. And then I started doing talk radio, almost as an afterthought. I used to call it my retirement job, and I worked for almost 10 years at KSTP AM, which is now ESPN here in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And then I did 5 years at least at News Talk, which was the iHeart, a property, which initially I was interested in it because it was an FM talk station. And when I was on, so my partner on that show was Congressman Tom Emmer. He wasn't a congressman then, but he was sort of in between being a state representative and settling on running for Congress, coming down off of running for governor. And Tom and I just really hit it off. He's a great guy, and I don't agree with Tom politically on a lot of stuff. So I would just give him a hard time. And the other thing is that Tom had this thing where he would do what politicians do. He would eat the mic, and he would go on and on and on. And so I used to say, what are you saying? What the hell are you saying? And he would get so mad at me. But we forged a really great show. It was literally lightning in a bottle. We had a great time. We disagreed, but we never left the studio without being friends. And that was, and he is a really important person in my life and a good friend of mine. And, it was a great show. And then they took us off FM. We were very close to challenging Tom Bernard for the number one slot in the market in Men 25-54. And what they were really worried about is their cherished little sports station at that time, KFAN, which was on 11:30 a.m., was going to get lost in the mix. And so they flipped us. They put KFAN on FM, and they put us on AM. And I remember just being, what a craven, disgusting thing to do. Here we had a winning show, and they just couldn't resist putting the sports station on. Because you know what we need? We need more people talking about sports in this country. That's what we need.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
jeez.
Then I had started podcasting when I left KSTP because somebody told me, some consultant said, well, you should do podcasting. And I was furious at him. I was like, I hated him for saying that to me. How dare you? And I started podcasting, and I remember my producer at KSTP helped me start podcasting. And I would call him up in the middle of the night and go, damn it, this is, and I went through a very tough learning curve getting it up and running in 2009 because nobody knew how to get, the Apple Store did not know how to get podcasts on the internet. I had to go through, hell, because I go to the Apple Store, and finally I had to go to the Genius Bar, and they found some kid in the back that was like, oh no, this is what you do. So we got it up, and we got it on the internet, on iTunes, and then from there I figured out where to put it. And so then when I got my job, because I was doing all this crazy stuff. So long story, I love telling this story, but I was doing podcasts, and I was doing radio shows all over the country from my apartment in Uptown.
Wow.
So we just left our doors open, and people would bring pizza, and I'd be sitting there. I'd have to close all the windows in the summer, and I was doing afternoons at some station in Chicago wearing a pair of gym shorts. I actually came out of unemployment with more money than I went into it because I would do like 5 shows in one day, and I was doing the podcast just as an afterthought. And the good thing is I had ex-government cars as a sponsor, so from the get-go I had them sponsored, and I don't want to go on and on, but then I got a job back in radio. And after I left News Talk, I figured I was never going to get a job in radio again, so I started podcasting. And plus, I didn't want a job in radio. I was so mad at radio that I was like, I'm just going to do this. And so then I started podcasting in earnest, and that's where that brought us up to today. So now I'm an authority on podcasting, and I'm an authority on radio, and I hope that I am worthy of being an authority on media in this country. So podcasting has grown enormously since 2009, and even since 2013, 35% penetration of podcasts. There's literally a million podcasts, and more and more people are listening to podcasts and turning away from the radio. It's killing radio.
You mentioned all the apps from Apple. How would a fruit company know how to do that anyway? Right?
Really?
Forrest Gump would say, okay.
No,
What was that?
he had made a joke about how a fruit company would know anything about podcasting, but you're right though. I think voice is a big deal because things were trending toward video for a long time, and YouTube is just this huge giant of a company. Under Google, obviously, but there's something about YouTube where you can't really take it on the go. You've got to be, you can't just listen to it. You've got to have it open. It's hard to pick up where you left off. And with voice and with these podcasting apps, people have that opportunity to just take it in the car with them.
And
it's huge.
We don't have commercial blocks. And, whenever I've filled in on the radio, I just find it to be really restrictive creatively because we can just have a conversation, and we don't have to be looking at the clock going, okay, because somebody's talking, and it's like, you better spit it out because we got a break in 35 seconds. Right. And radio doesn't have to be that way, but they just can't get out of that formatting where you've got 10-minute and 7-minute segments. Well, you can't, what I just said would take 3 segments. You guys would have hung up on me a long time ago. Podcasting is great for that, and that's what's great about it. So as podcasting is taking over, the other thing is that people can time shift podcasts just like they can time shift shows on Netflix. So They watch stuff when they can, they listen to stuff when they can, And local podcasts are going to become more and more important as penetration of podcasting reaches that. We're at that critical mass now where it's going to start going up fast, where you're going to start to see 80%, 90% penetration of podcasting. And that's when it's really going to affect radio. And I firmly believe that most broadcast owners are going to start turning their frequencies back into the federal government for other things.
Wow.
They're going to AM 1500 will be for data communication because, I'll give you an example. So ESPN 1500 is almost delisted from the Arbitron. They have less than a 1 share.
Wow.
So what do you do with that? How do you sell it? Your podcast, my podcast has a bigger audience than that whole radio station probably. And we're not that big, But if you have a couple of thousand feeds a day, yeah, you're bigger than the radio station when it's less than a point. And that's what you're dealing with, a station that's down in the tenths of points. And there's more than one of them. So what do you do with these stations? Well, at some point, the government's going to say, this is the AM bandwidth is huge. Why don't we just put data on it or something? Let's just pay these people to put their frequencies back. And I think you're going to see a lot fewer radio stations. I don't know why companies are still buying radio stations, but they are. But it's, it's if you can get the price down to the point where you're in less debt. But God help these companies that borrowed billions to buy 1,000 radio stations because they're stuck with them.
Right, and
they deserve it.
Well, it's funny, you talk about that, whether it's music or whether it's talk, with podcasts, like Netflix, you get to choose what you want to listen to when you want to listen to it.
Right.
You look at TV now, nobody watches commercials, and if they're forced to watch commercials, they're on their phone. They're not watching the commercials.
Yeah, I'm convinced the commercials is one of the reasons. I believe that if they eliminated the commercials from television, which they will never do, they can't.
Right.
Except unless you go subscription, like I have a subscription to Amazon Prime.
Right.
In addition to being able to buy vitamins cheaper, I can also watch all of the Route 66s, which I've gone down a rabbit hole, and I've been watching all the Route 66s the last, 3 weeks, because there's hundreds of them. Or you can watch all the Adam 12s or all the Star Trek.
But Bob, that brings me
everyone.
But that brings me to a question: Why can't people in TV and radio see that they are now the dinosaurs? And you mentioned the radio just can't get out of that format. Well, I mean, why not? Why aren't they recognizing that there's a different product, that young people are listening to podcasts, and it's people, my dad's age, who are watching television?
Right, and listening to the radio. And it's the scary part is, okay, let me give you an example. WCCO radio isn't even in the top 20, 25, 54. So their ratings come from 65 plus adults. For people listening outside of the market, this is the biggest radio station. When I first came here a long time ago, there were only 3 Arbitron rating, and people said, well, how come there's only 3 books in Minneapolis? And finally, all the other broadcasters got together and said, we want a 4th book. And CCO said, no, you don't. And they said, yes, we do. And CCO had a 32 share in that book because it was winter, and everyone listened to CCO in the winter. That has a station as huge as that has gone from having a 32 share to basically being out of the top 20, 25, 54. So their audience is all 65 plus, and all the people who have brain have left radio. They are all doing other things. They're all in digital. They're all in some other business that's related to some other media business that's related, because the good people were forced out by the schlubs who just want to keep their jobs. That's what you're dealing with. So I often say it this way. The guy at the local Olive Garden that manages the Olive Garden, that guy has more autonomy than a local program director or general manager. That's what's wrong with radio. It's run by a bunch of people who are scared to death, that they're scared of their own shadows. And I mean, I'll give you an example. They fired some guy at some sports station in I don't even know where, which had no ratings, but I guess they did pretty good. I looked it up because I wanted to know. And he made the comparison of somebody getting fired, and it was comedy. He made the comparison of some guy got fired to the Holocaust, and they fired him. It's like, he said, hey, if we can think about this in a funny way, it's this guy getting fired from this team is kind of like the Holocaust. And people went nuts. And instead of saying, give that man a raise, that's creative. Let's put him on morning. They fired him. That's what's wrong with radio. They're scared to death of their own shadow.
Oh, it's radio, it's TV, it's all of it. You know, it's ESPN guys getting fired for saying a chink in the armor.
Well, I mean, and ESPN guys,
Yeah.
they get hired to give an opinion. Then they give an opinion somebody doesn't like, and they're canned. Then you know what they do? They go and get their own podcast.
Right.
But,
And
yeah.
that's what you have to do. There are stories all over the place but like this, that young people who are, who are doubling their money, going to work for digital, content creators. They can work 9 to 5, They obviously work more when they have to, but they're not in this vice. See, when broadcasting, everyone was listening to broadcast. So there was 3 TV stations and 7 radio stations. It was great to work in radio because everybody was listening, and there was if somebody, wanted to say something, they had to pick up the phone and call the talk radio station. Well, now they just say it on Facebook. So you can be an idiot on Facebook now, and you don't have to be an idiot on the radio. And that's the whole reason for talk radio to exist, so that idiots would call and you'd hang up on it. That was the whole point. That's what made it entertaining most of the time. Now, and in addition, now all the information. So if you and I are interested in an axis shift, the Earth's, magnetic fields are moving, and some people think that the Earth is going to have an axis shift. If we're interested in that, we can get loads of information about it, and we can do 5 podcasts about it. I'm going to do a podcast about it because I am interested. And then nobody's going to say, oh, you can't talk about that. Or that's too much like Art Bell. Or that's, we don't do that here. Bob, you got to be careful. We don't need, it's like, you just do it. And if they don't like your podcast, they don't listen to it. My favorite thing is somebody called me once, or somebody wrote me an email. I don't like your podcast. You think, or something like that. And I wrote back, why are you listening to it? You're an idiot. Don't download it. Goodbye, and don't ever contact me.
Yeah, we've gotten those emails too.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's wrong with you? Why are you listening, you dumbass? This is what's going on across the country. No wonder people are turning away from broadcast, because they are in a mode of being absolutely non-offensive. So, since every opinion is offensive, radio stations would have to fire everyone, and then you can run for president. Because the most offensive guy in the country is the friggin' president. And it works every time.
Bob, let me ask you something like this. I mean, I've never seen, I don't know if we've had a time in history where things have changed so quickly. You look at, I have images of my childhood of Sunday morning, and there's my dad sitting eating his Wheaties in his underwear, reading the Star Tribune. Okay, and he's 72 and he still does that. Okay, and then people like us grew up with the nightly news and the 3 TV channels and the newspapers, and have transitioned into podcasting and the new form of media. And then you have young people. If you were born in the mid-90s, you've never read a magazine, you've never read a newspaper, you've never heard of the nightly news. I mean, have we ever lived through a time where things have changed just so rapidly?
It's funny. I have a friend who's younger, and I said to her recently, I pulled out, I think it was C.C. Peniston's Finally, because I like that song and it's from the 90s.
Yeah.
I know it's from late 80s. And I go, you might be a little too young for this, but do you remember this? Oh, I remember that song. Yeah, that was like a golden oldie to her. So we are under, we're going, we all know, and this is so, this is just, everyone says this, but we're going through a very, very fast-changing, fast-paced technology change in this country. They're being driven right now in media. It's being driven by, successive smartphones that are, getting more and more powerful. And you're walking around with a computer that was bigger than any computer in the country in 1995. Mm-hmm. It's amazing the level of computing power that's in the hands of people in terms of tools. So that is really disrupting huge things. And I believe that the final result of all this is going to be that our government is actually going to be disrupted to the point where no one's going to pay any attention to it. They're going to disconnect the government in Washington from everything. They're going to have a cyborg capital in Omaha. And they don't tell these guys that we're just going to have fun watching them think that they're in charge of anything. I mean, the government's shut down, and very few people even care.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
I wouldn't have noticed if I didn't hear about it.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I would. The only thing I've noticed is there's less traffic.
yeah, absolutely. It seems the only people that care about it are the people on the left. I don't know, and that brings up an interesting point, because no matter what, though, I mean,
Because they work for the government.
right, the bulk of the I guess journalism around government still centers around Washington, and to a lesser extent the state capitals. Do you see it getting so decentralized? Do you think people
Yep.
actually will catch on that they'll talk about what's happening down on Main Street versus caring about what's going on at the state capitol or in Washington?
Nobody really cares about what's happening in Washington or the state capitol. What they care about in Washington is the president throwing one tantrum, or these are stunts to get people talking about him and keep him on television.
Right.
No one gives a damn what happens at the state capitol until something happens that causes them. I have a friend who's a Democrat, and she lives in a big apartment building, and they're going to put the light rail through her apartment building, basically, and she's furious. And I said, what did you think they were going to do when you were voting Democrat all these years? They're proponents, and I'm not even criticizing Democrats. They believe in high-density urban environments with trains and buses and streetcars rather than cars. I mean, this is what they believe in.
Absolutely.
It's no secret. I'm not criticizing them, but it's always amusing to me to hear people who are, of a political persuasion who vote for it every year, and then when they do something or don't do something, they're shocked. So they're not really paying attention to what's happening. And I'll tell you what, as far as journalism is concerned, there's a difference today between journalism back in the day when there were 5 reporters who used to go to the White House for press conferences and they were held in the president's office versus journalism today. What happens in journalism today is they give a piece to a associate producer or a production assistant who gets the video together. There's a correspondent somewhere. He goes into a studio or uses an IP codec and gives a read. They take all the video, and then a kid, literally, somebody that's 20, 22, 23 years old, puts it together, and then it's looked at by a producer, and an editor cleans it up, and they put it on television. And this is why, and they're trained to write in the following manner. Fire in California, burning people's houses down, owe the humanity. That's what they're trained to write. And that's the copy.
Yeah.
That's broadcast television. When it comes to analysis, there's very few reporters that are actually finding out information and saying, okay, I got a scoop. I'm going to write a story about this. Most of them go around, read any story that you see. So something happens. So somebody does a rally in Ames, Iowa. And here's what it says. Senator Boop did a rally in Ames, Iowa in preparation for his presidential campaign for 2020. Next paragraph. There were this many people at the event. Usually they don't even say that. But the very first or second paragraph is, Sally Johnson from Ames came to the event, and she says, quote, and then you fill in some kind of ridiculous quote. I don't know why these guys come to these events and say these things. I hate this guy. And then they don't do any journalism. They go out and they interview people who are there. And they take a quote from somebody, slap it together, and send it to Washington. It's edited by another person that's 24 years old, and then it's thrown up on the website with a picture. That's it. That's journalism today.
Isn't journalism the way it was dead then? Because if you look at it, everybody's an opinion person now. It's like everybody on TV is a Bill O'Reilly wannabe. I mean,
Yep.
we've gone away from reporting news. We've gone away from investigative stories, and it's become all about a soundbite or who can yell the loudest or who looks the best to put on TV. I mean, if you go away from, if news becomes entertainment or all about ratings, then where do people get their news anymore? I mean, what's journalism the way it was?
They don't get any news.
Yeah, journalism the way it was isn't the way it is anymore.
No, I mean they were called the Fourth Estate for a reason, and I would say that it's just an extended arm of one party or another at this point.
Well, and so many people in media, quote unquote, are blurring the lines between activism and journalism, right? I mean,
Right. Well, part of the problem with people who are personalities is they feel the need to advocate. You know, this whole thing with Tucker Carlson and this idea that suddenly, so now the conservatives have discovered that we're amoral, and so now suddenly they're talking. They're talking about. They actually sound like Karl Marx in terms of we shouldn't be this way, and the government's job is to make people happy, and you know we've got all these problems. And so I went through and I researched crime and all these statistics about that they use as metrics to determine whether we're actually doing well or not. And but believe it or not, and surprisingly enough, people are just fine with things are not as bad as they are made out to be by these opinion makers. But they're not. They haven't engaged in journalism in media, whether it's cable news or the networks, for a long time. It has been advocacy for a long time, and now it's just finally reached the point where the guys that advocate, Don Lemon, I'm sure gets better ratings than some guy that just sits there and reads the news. That's what's happened. And if you really want to grow as a human being, you have to turn it off. You just have to stop watching it because it's just bad information.
Right, and I've said before, and I'll say it again, CNN is up in the ratings because all they do is cover President Trump 24/7. And I've said this publicly, that what's the movie thing, the Golden Globes, or what's the new thing coming up in next month? Is that the Golden Globes or the Oscars?
Oh, you mean
the Oscars ought to get President Trump to host it.
You're probably right because they don't bother with comedians. Who are they going to use? What's her name from The View?
Well, you can't get a comedian because they made a tweet 10 years ago that offended somebody, so you can't use them. And President Trump will be the star of it anyway, so why not just have him do it? Heck, I'd watch it, and I never watch those things.
Right. Well, there you go. No, it's reached. It's just. So the other problem then is people are imitating that. So you have a bunch of unprofessional people doing YouTube and doing podcasts who they don't know any better, so they just imitate what they're seeing. So the first step in this sort of podcasting realm is, I would be it for me to say what anyone should do, but you have to find your own voice and you have to find your own ideas, and then you've got a podcast.
Right.
And most people that do it end up that way. You guys had a blog that actually did do journalism, that actually did uncover things, and that actually had an effect in the community locally, and now you've extended that into a podcast. So you're way ahead of 90% of these people because they just think, I'm going to throw up a camera and do a video, and it's usually on YouTube, and I'm fascinated with YouTube. I watch YouTube all the time, and I'm just going to say a bunch of stuff. And because that's what Bill O'Reilly does, so I'm going to be like him. And it's like, okay, so we're awash in opinion. And of course, as you know, everyone has an opinion.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's a combination of being able to be yourself along with being able to do the research and come up with compelling stories that people are going to want to hear. And there is so much of that at the local level. And I don't know why there's not more people, I don't want to say complaining about what's going on in their city, but at least trying to make their friends and neighbors aware of it. And I think part of that is like Bill O'Reilly syndrome as well, where it's like, well, if I don't have 1 million listeners, if I don't have 70,000 people liking my Facebook posts, if I don't, that's a problem. We need people who are okay with just informing the people that live in their city about what's going on around them.
Yeah. Well, small is beautiful, and people don't understand that because they think everything has to be, just a massive success, because no wonder people are depressed. They think they have to, I'm going to open a dress shop and it has to be franchised across the country in 6 months. Good luck.
Right.
But why can't you just have a dress shop and sell some stuff on eBay and help customers and do well. You don't have to be the biggest thing in the biggest ship in the shipping business in order to be happy and successful and perform a community service if that's what you're interested in, or do a really good job with your tarot card reading YouTube channel, and so you get 1,200 listeners instead of 120,000.
Well,
Yeah.
and I would even I would even add that one of the things about doing local stories is you see how bad the mainstream media really is. I mean, they have the resources and the money and the wherewithal to cover any story they want to. And all they want to do is focus on somebody's tweet or what somebody's soundbite, or they focus on the same thing everybody else is. And the opportunity to speak about things not being spoken is so right in front of our faces.
Yeah, they will never do that until somebody forces them to, and even then, it'll be too. What would happen if the Today Show started doing substantive news? They'd be out of business in 6 minutes because the people watching. So these people don't understand that these shows like Today and the nightly news, and maybe a couple of news shows like 60 Minutes or Nightline. A lot of people don't even know Nightline is still there, for example. These shows are bleeding viewers like they've been cut. Their jugular's been cut. They're just pouring viewers. Oh, they're losing hundreds of thousands of viewers a year. And it's, and then you take a YouTube channel that's some workout, a woman who is a workout champion, who does a good job with video, and she'll have 1 million views a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a guy over here that does a motorcycle show, and he's got 1 million views a week. So when you look at YouTube and you look at the number of views, when you look at the number of subscribers, same with podcasts. We're talking about substantially larger audiences. So what's happening is that's just being atomized throughout the world, because if you hate Trump, you can listen to podcasts all day from people who hate Trump. You don't ever have to hear an opinion that you don't agree with. And the same is true with people who think Trump is Jesus. Trump, he's great. They can listen to stuff all day long that confirms their bias. So you have to figure out a way to get to both sides with information that's important to them. That's really hard to do.
It is, and I think, and I guess I was hoping to go here by the end, but maybe it's better to do it now and circle back around. Is that when we look at technology with artificial intelligence and stuff, that as it is being progressed, and I don't know how much you're aware of like Dragonfly and all that over in China, but just the capabilities of how predictive artificial intelligence can be, where and we're looking especially with how voice is going to be just huge, and we have these Alexas and HomePods and stuff in our home, and its job, like for Alexa, is to predict what we're going to buy, and to present that to us. Well, and the same thing will be true, I believe, with the kind of content that we consume. And it's possible that we will never find the stuff that challenges us and really tells us the stuff that we need to know, because our habits will say, oh, they want to hear the Mickey Mouse Hour or whatever it is, or they're going to cut snippets from here and snippets from there because they come from maybe articles we've read online, and so we're only going to get fed what makes our ears happy instead of this getting a whole view of what's actually going on in the world, let alone our communities.
Well, it's a serious challenge, and by the way, it isn't just. So what does a powerful AI system do when it can access virtually all of the data that every single person in the world has? Because number one, your phones can listen to you.
Right.
Number two, every single thing that you have ever done from the time that we've been collecting data, so 1991 to now, is somewhere and available somewhere to be factor analyzed. And if a machine can do it fast, then it can anticipate more and more effectively what you want. And maybe we're going to have a sort of new asceticism where there will be a movement of people who say, we've got to have a system, and I'm thinking off the top of my head now, but I mean, we've got to have a system of living that demands human contact, that learns to ask open-ended questions to humans, and also includes some sort of awareness practice so that people can find themselves again. Because if your world is constantly filled with Alexa and phones and computers and, and see the difference, people say, well, what do you think you're doing? And it's like, this is my business. This is what I do. This is how I make my money. So yeah, I'm Techno Johnny.
Right.
But I'm talking about the consumer. You have to take some time to deglaze from it and disconnect from it enough. And you really need to be aware of what data you're sharing. And you need to know how this stuff works so that you can understand what it's doing. And I think a lot of people are oblivious to it, and they don't care. And they're just happy to see the ad about shoes because they wanted to buy a pair of shoes. And if we are that stupid, then we're going to be controlled by these machines. And all of this experience that we're having now is going to go away. And we're going to be slaves.
So iRobot is really going to happen, right?
Yeah.
For those Bob, I want to get back to something that because I don't understand any of that stuff. So I want to get back to something you said about not having to hear the other side, about how, if you love this or hate this, you could get as much or as little as you want. And it has an effect on our political world with the politicians themselves. Because Jay and I were talking off the air. President Trump, I'll just use him as an example, has 60 million Twitter followers. So if he wants to get a message out, he doesn't have to go get abused on 60 Minutes or Meet the Press or CNN. He actually can reach more people.
Yeah, he's got a direct line.
Yeah, he can reach more people by tweeting, but isn't there also a negative to that nobody engages the other side, nobody faces tough questions, nobody thinks they have to anymore?
Nobody does. I have friends. Some people would be surprised to hear that, but I have friends, and it's very interesting to me when you have conversations with people, and I'm going to use the right as an example. They will repeat what somebody said as though it's fact. So they'll say, I don't know, pick an issue. Usually it's about up to now. It's all about the wall now, but it used to be about the Russian thing. And this whole thing is a witch hunt. Okay, well, we know who said that. So when you go through, so what I've learned to do is to say, well, now wait a minute, let's go through and talk about why this is happening. So most people who are Trump supporters are furious that he's being investigated. And I think the investigation has gone on too long. But and nevertheless, we need to know if the Russians influenced the election in the United States as definitively as we can. And the reason we need to know is so that we can do something about it, because we don't want foreign countries influencing our elections, regardless of who got elected. Right? I don't care who got elected, because it's in the long run, whether it was Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, probably isn't going to make that much of a difference. I know people go, oh my God, how can he say that? Because the presidency of this country isn't supposed to be that important. We've made it that important, but it's not supposed to be.
Exactly.
Plus, there's another election in a year.
Yeah, when you go through the details with people, they just repeat over and over again what they heard. They just repeat it. And it's because the Fox News viewer will not watch CNN, and vice versa, because they want to feel good. They watch television to feel good. They don't watch television to be challenged. So if you go on CNN and bring up conservative ideas, you're going to get a lot of hate mail, and vice versa, because people just want to hear what they want to hear. They've already decided whatever the thing is. And, has it always been that way? I don't know. I think talented politicians have always been able to tell people what they want to hear. And some of them do it. Some of them are amazing at it. They just tell people what they want to hear. Trump's a brilliant politician because he tells his constituency consistently what they want to hear, and that's why they continue to support him. And nobody can figure out what he's doing because he's a populist. So he just keeps saying stuff, and wherever you get these politicians, right or left, what do you think Maxine Waters is? She's just like Trump.
Right.
She's just really old.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I mean,
anyway.
she's a populist, like on the other fringe, but yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
And populism, of course, is terrible policy, and it's just people keep. So I guess what I'm saying is that they're not going to seek out information until they reach a point of enlightenment where they realize that they will start doing it because they're enlightened. You know, being involved in politics is like being an alcoholic for most people. They just want to get that rush they get from politics, and they pick a direction. So they join up on the left or they join up on the right, and they become these feral, horrible people who are just, well, I don't like him because, and then they're talking about Joe at the local meeting. Well, you know what he said. I don't like that guy. That kind of stuff. It's this horrible backbiting nonsense.
Right.
They're a bunch of drug addicts. They just don't know it. They think they're wonderful people, but so getting away from it and pulling back and saying, let it be what it is, doesn't mean that you quit getting involved in politics, but how do you get involved in politics and love everybody, and care about everybody? It's really hard. And it's just, there are layers and layers of this biased information that's designed, it's confirmation bias over and over again. That's why I think local issues are great, because you might end up with something that happens in Crystal that Republicans and Democrats, once they take off their little red hats and their little blue hats, go, you know what? I don't like that bike trail. And we need to do something about that. Well, now you've got something. And I think that's the antidote to all this stuff is, being activated on local issues.
Definitely strange bedfellows at the local level. And I'll tell you what, it's part of, you mentioned this being like being an alcoholic, and I agree. I have made it I watch less and less news. I listen to less. I I hardly ever listen to the radio anymore. Maybe the Twins game. But I mean, I have the part that enlightens me about the local level is the strange bedfellows you could make on issues, and the strange bedfellows you could make on a city council when there's no majority whip standing there counting votes, threatening to take away your committee assignments if you vote for this or that, or threatening to not fund your reelection campaign. It's amazing what can be agreed upon. It's incredible how different it is from a state capital or from Washington, D.C.
And what's interesting is you guys have been doing this for 10 years.
Yeah.
It's like for 10 years you've been saying, this is how we work things. You want to know how government works? This is how. We get together and we figure out how to solve the problem. So
right.
What's the problem? The problem is all of this shouting and screaming is screwing everything up. Because normally, we had, you make me think about so much stuff because so our system, we elect congressmen. They're the only real people that are elected by the popular vote until we started electing senators, which is a mistake because now they think they're miniature presidents.
Right.
Agree completely. And representation of the states is dead.
Right. So aside from that, I don't think 100 years ago people really got that involved in federal issues. So if they had a federal problem, if they needed a highway, or if they needed something taken care of with maybe the river was overrunning the banks downtown or something, they might get the local congressman who was drunk all day anyway, and they might say, hey, can you help us with this? And he might say, well, hell yeah, I'll get involved and I have one question. Can you rename the dam the George so-and-so dam? Well, yes, sir, we can do that for you. You're a hail fellow, well met, we'll take care of it. And so then he would go get the funding, and they'd get some funding to build a dam, right? And most people didn't care. Oh, look, they built a new dam, so we don't have to worry about, logs rolling up into our front yard anymore. And now it's reached a level of absurdity where they're legislating how we're supposed to treat people, And I think it's just fascinating that we're now involved. It's now become the federal government. Forget the state government, but the federal government is becoming this incredible, because it's creating all this abrasion constantly, whatever they do. Now the federal government has to build the wall. Forget California. What's their role in this? Forget Texas, forget the local landowners. Now we're going to have, and better yet, we're going to have the Army build the wall. Okay. Every time they do something, they create huge problems, and no wonder people are upset. So that's my rant about the government. It wasn't supposed to be this way. They created our government so it didn't do anything. People were supposed to be involved at the local level to solve their own problems. And unfortunately, people aren't that responsible anymore. So you guys got to teach people. Let's engage on local issues, and maybe we can feel empowered because we're solving the bike trail problem or something. I don't know.
Right, and that's kind of where I was headed, is that, we've got a federal government that's out of control but is becoming less and less relevant. And
Yes.
and then on the other side, eventually, people are only going to hear what they want to hear until the robots kill us. So why is it important then?
The sex robot book.
Yeah. So why is it important at all that we create this culture of podcasting and bring in, locally? Why instead don't we just embrace what's going to happen and just dive in head first? And how do we get there?
Embrace the suck.
What's that?
I think that embrace the suck. I think that I think I said that local podcasts are going to become more important. So there is hopefully in the next 10 years, people will start to look at a local podcast and they'll go, "Hey, I found this local podcast. It's really good. It talks about local issues." Once they figure out, and younger generations have already figured it out. Once they figure out that they don't have to listen to National Public Radio podcasts, that they can listen to two crazy guys in a basement in Crystal and learn stuff, you'll start to see growth. And it'll take some digital marketing and some things of that nature, but I think local podcasts are going to become much more important than what's on the radio. And that's why so many local broadcasters have become podcasters. 10 years ago, people laughed at them when they became podcasters. Now, Steve Dahl can get fired from WLS in Chicago and just go back to podcasting, and he'll have a bigger audience and a younger audience than he had on WLS. And I think that's probably going to be true with GL as well. They'll probably have a bigger audience on podcasts once they figure out that they can reach younger people. They'll probably have a bigger audience than they ever had on radio.
Right.
So we will discover local podcasts. Then it's going to be up to people doing podcasts to say, okay, well, what is my role? I'm not doing this I've often said this. I'm not doing this for people. I'm doing this for myself. I'm doing this to enrich myself and because I enjoy doing it. It's fun for me to do podcasts. This is really fun because I don't have to do I can go upstairs and I don't have to do anything. This is the best podcast I've done all month because I don't have to do anything because I'm on your podcast. But that's when podcasts start to, and this is where we have to be careful because then they're going to start talking about standards, and the men in the white coats will try to sterilize podcasts. Oh, you guys can't, you can't do that. We need to find our voices. We need to get better at our voices, whatever they are, and we need to get better at what we do. And some will and some won't. But I think the future of digital, if I look on it instead of negatively, if I look at it positively, I think that it's the best opportunity for somebody to maybe hear something they don't agree with because they, and it kind of contradicts what I said earlier, but they might say, hey, I really like this red-haired guy that does this crazy stuff, and maybe the red-haired guy that does the crazy stuff is a libertarian. Yeah. And, I don't think the future is Democrat or Republican. I think both parties are failing rapidly, and the Republican Party is just failing faster than the Democratic Party, despite the recent election. They're both completely out to lunch when it comes to solutions for all the problems that we have. So, it's going to be hard. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be hard. We're in a cusp period. We have to find our footing, but I think in the long run that digital is going to be better as a media source in the long run than anything in broadcast.
Absolutely. And I think that you're right, and that's why we do what we do. As far as podcasts go, even radio stations do podcasts, talk radio especially. They don't, it's not just if you missed it, you're not going to catch it again. It
took them 10 years to figure that out.
Yeah, it did. But
there were some faster than others. The first podcast I ever listened to was Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
And he was one of the first to podcast his own show quite a while ago.
He's just doing the show he did today.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. I said to the people at KSTP, we should do a podcast. And this is a long time ago. This is like in 2003. And they laughed at me. They called me the podcaster. and now their station has less than a 1 share.
Yeah.
Think about that. So what they're going to learn is what National Public Radio has done so well, which is they have figured out how to spin shows that are on the radio into podcasts to become very successful podcasts and good podcasts. Mm-hmm. The New York Times does a great show every day, a follow-up of what's going on in the news. It's 10 minutes. It's probably the number 1 podcast in the country. Huh. You know, the Wall Street Journal has podcasts. So
they do their Paul Harvey bit, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it's too bad that radio couldn't figure that out. But see, I don't even look at radio. I don't even want to think about radio anymore because it makes me mad.
Right.
And it makes me, you know, I have to revisit it again and again. And I have to tell myself, stop thinking about radio. I'll give you an example very quickly. And I'm sorry I have to keep doing this, but
it's okay.
Somebody said to me, you should do a syndicated radio show. So I went to a local syndicator. And my idea was I was going to bring the podcast back to radio. So I was going to take excerpts from my podcast and put them into 4 segments for a 1 hour long syndicated radio show. And they were like, we're going to sell your podcast. You're going to make money. It's going to be great, blah, 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 blah. So I got the only affiliate, which was the Patriot. And thank God for Lee Michaels over at the Patriot. And they were supposed to get other affiliates. So I had one affiliate for my massive syndicated show. And I started doing this syndicated show. Well, eventually, to monetize it, I had to start putting it up as a podcast. And I worked my ass off. I did 70 weeks of this. And finally, I realized this is a detour. You've taken a detour. You don't need radio anymore. You don't need it. And you don't need to take a podcast and turn it into a radio show. Just let it go. So what's happened is that once you break through and start doing this, you don't need radio, and you don't want to think like radio people think, because they think they have an archaic approach, whether they're nice guys or whether they're right or wrong. You know, they have this archaic approach. Radio had an opportunity. Commercial radio had an opportunity to do what National Public Radio does a long time ago. The number 1 information radio station in this market is KNOW. It's not a commercial radio station. And it's by far number 1.
Huh.
Okay? Yeah. And so the news talk station was News Talk 1540, number 1. No, they're not. They're number 1 with 72 to 39-year-olds with 65 to 75-year-old men at 4:00 in the afternoon. They're number 1. But by far the National Public Radio. Why? Because they put money into the product over and over again. They put money into podcasts. They created and spun off several podcasts that are really well done. They're well produced. These podcasts that are number 1 in the world, they have producers, they have writers, they have technical people, just like TV shows do. And they have the audiences to reflect that. So if media would put money into their product, they would be competitive. But they're not, because why? Because they hire the weekend kid to do we need to show and say, let's get somebody for $12.50 an hour and put him on the air, because you know what, he can talk, and it's terrible. You know, so that's the future. So all of us podcasters, if we just keep working on our product and try to get better at what we're doing, no matter where you are in the realm, it's going to make everything better. You know, and I hope you guys keep doing your podcast too.
Well, we plan on it. This is number 100, and the next 100 will probably fly by as well, because there's enough for us to talk about in local politics, local government. That
100 podcasts, and we barely scratched the surface.
Oh yeah, no, 100 is you just figured it out.
Yeah, I feel like that. Some days I feel like I haven't figured anything out.
Well, you got to teach me. Yeah, you got to teach me all these things called apps. You got to teach me all that.
I'm trying.
Yeah,
I'm trying.
You can go over and watch my VCR anytime, though. I mean,
but no, you know, someone has to represent the Luddites.
Right.
So,
Andrew does a fine job.
VCR. You just figure out. You're like, I just figured out how to set the VCR clock, and now I got to get this phone with apps on it.
That's right. Now I got to figure out beta.
Yeah. Oh.
Remember that? Life was so simple. It was beta or VCR. Remember that or whatever? VHS.
Yeah.
That's what it was called.
Yeah, VHS. It is
Yeah.
right hot on the heels of Laserdisc.
What was Laserdisc?
Those were the-
Laserdisc.
Yeah.
I love Laserdiscs. Are still cool.
Yeah,
Who
absolutely.
has a Laserdisc player?
Yeah, I don't.
Remember, they were like $1,000 too. They were like incredibly expensive. And if your neighbor had one, they were like, "Yeah, come on over. I got a Laserdisc." Oh my God! I can't wait to watch Heat on a Laserdisc.
That was better than the guy with the cheater box.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. So everyone thinks 5G is going to kill us all and so forth, but 5G will really make a huge difference in terms of quality as well. So all of us are going to benefit greatly from 5G and the 5G developments in smartphones. So that's really going to be good for you and good for me too.
I agree with that. But I mean, I know that that's where like a lot of those Chinese developments with the Dragonfly technology and all that came out of too, was like true 5G. And
many
so when you
Gs
get
do I
into the you have 4.
I have 4
yeah, you
Gs?
have 4 on one of those.
Okay.
Yeah, iPhone 8s or 7 Plus or whatever you got.
I have no idea.
Yeah, you're running
Ask my
4.
wife. I don't know.
But we're not running true 5 here anywhere yet. I know that like there are car companies and stuff like that are just waiting for that with the whole you can't truly have driverless cars until we have the 5G, and that's where it starts to get predictive, and that's where things are like just instantaneous.
But Jay, we talked about this the other week. I mean, we hear the same thing about the electric car in the 70s, and we're still subsidizing that, but that never happened. I mean, do you think G5 is really going to change that?
I think that 5G, that's where a lot of the predictive stuff is going to come from. That's also when we're going to have like immediate, like real-time decisions, and it's going to make what makes like driverless cars possible and all of that. But I think, from a consumer standpoint, it is going to improve things like immeasurably. I mean, I think it's going to more than double what is currently possible with the technology we have with the 4G.
Yeah, I put up very big audio files. Now,
Yeah.
the podcast standard is 128K. I wouldn't think of putting a 128K audio file up. And so
Yeah.
it doesn't pick up all my feeds, So I have to use other analytics to find the feeds because I'm putting up high quality audio files. So
Right.
5G will completely obviate that. It won't care how big your file is.
Well, that's great. Yeah.
It'll download a lot faster. We'll be able to download, really high quality video and audio on phones, and then there's all these other cool things like being able to project, and that's out there now. You can project from your phone on a wall or something to that effect. So you can watch YouTube and watch it on your ceiling instead of sitting there up all night with your phone in your face. Stuff like that. I don't know what the application is, but I think it's just going to mean that the phone is going to be more and more the center for all of this. And so, our challenge as podcasters is going to be, how do I get a piece of that?
I think it is until the point where they perfect the technology to make it like all contacts and stuff like that, and because then we'll just see it as is, like it won't have to project at all because it'll just be like right there in front of our eyes.
Ooh, that's pretty cool.
I've heard that's where like VR is going to go eventually. So
you would basically wear a pair of glass. No, you'd be wearing contacts, and it would be VR.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I've heard.
These kids today with their VR contact lenses running around in those driverless cars.
I mean, could you imagine that, though? The kids wearing VR contacts in the school. Teacher would have no idea that the kid's been out to lunch for like 3 hours. And
why do we need school?
we won't at that point.
What's the point?
Yeah.
You get educated on your VR contact lenses. What are you doing? I'm taking a test.
Yeah, I just visited the prehistoric era. It's
amazing.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump was there. So when you buy ads, you'll be in the prehistoric era, and all of a sudden it'll be a political ad from from Elizabeth Warren or something.
Yeah.
It's great talking to you guys.
It's great talking to you too, and I hope that that our paths meet again sooner than previously.
Oh yeah,
No doubt. You do a great job, Bob, and thanks for coming on. We really do appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, you want to go ahead and plug all your stuff so that people know where to find you. And
The easiest way to tell people is the podcasts are available at thebobdavispodcasts.com. They're also on Spreaker.com, blogtalkradio.com, Stitcher.com, which Stitcher kind of is causing some issues. Spotify, what else? iTunes, of course. And, if you have Podbean or some other app that like Podcatcher, you just enter the name of the podcast and it will go find it for you. So they're available at all kinds of sources. Plus, there's streaming audio at thebobdavispodcast.com that plays the last 3 podcasts if you activate that. But people don't understand that they can go to the website and they can click on an individual podcast and play it right there on their phone. Or they can download it. If you have an Android device, sometimes Android devices are not, you need to quit out of all of your other apps. Or in those cases, I'd recommend you use Spotify or one of these podcast apps. iPhones, not so much.
yeah. No, the podcast app on the iPhone is amazing.
I don't have an Android, right?
No, you
Okay.
have an iPhone.
Does he have a flip phone?
No.
No, it's got the circular.
It's a
dial.
rotary, yeah.
I gotta call Mabel to get patched through.
I have a rotary phone right here. It's not hooked up, but I have 2 rotary phones. One of them
Wow.
is red and one of them is black. Yeah.
Well, that's where the red phone went.
Yeah, you pick up my phone, and on the back of it it says Dewey beats Truman. So I've had this a while.
I'll tell you a quick story. I
Yeah.
used to have a friend whose dad, he lived in Bowling Air Force Base. This is in Washington, D.C. And we would hang out, and we went over to his house one night. So we go through the base thing, and the guy has to pass us through and everything. And we get to his house. And we're in the kitchen, and there's 3 phones on the wall. There's a red phone, a white phone, and a yellow phone. And I go, what's with all the different colored phones? And he goes, well, the white phone is our regular phone. No, he goes, the yellow phone is our regular phone. He goes, the white phone is base command, and the red phone is the White House. And I go, bull. That's not, you're lying. And he goes, oh, really? He picked, now the only phone that had a dial was the yellow phone. He picked up the red phone, and he handed me the receiver, and this guy goes, White House signals, Lieutenant whatever. And I handed it back. So his dad was a Strategic Air Command colonel, and that's why he had a direct line to the White House. So
Wow.
the president would call him,
Holy
tell him to bomb the Russians.
Yeah, you tell them to invade Canada or something.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, thanks for being on the podcast.
And now I have to
Yeah.
shoot you. I told
Right.
you this, and now I have to shoot you.
I can die with my medals.
Just let me upgrade to 5G first so I have a running head start. Oh. All right. Well, thank you again for coming on. We have loved having you on, and we'll have to do this again either at our place or yours. So,
We will. Yeah, actually, that's what we should do is just get together because people don't know, but we had all kinds of technical issues before, and probably better we just get together somewhere. Or I'll bring the truck over.
yeah. That sounds good, too.
Whatever works.
All right. We'll wait till it gets warm for that.
All right. Well, Bob Davis, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
You got it.
All right. Bye. Well, how about that? I mean, we kind of took a whole tour there of
Yeah.
what's going on with podcasting, with radio. It's interesting, you know.
Yeah, it lived up to the hype.
Oh, I mean, I'm just thinking about all of this now, you know, and just kind of processing it. You know, it's like going to, I was going to say Old Country Buffet, but I guess those are gone. Golden Corral now, Pizza Ranch. I feel like I need to unbutton my pants and recline for a bit and process all of that.
I'm wearing Zubas. I don't have to do anything like that. My pants are already unbuttoned.
Oh boy, but I can't reiterate enough that podcasting puts the power back in the hands of the people, and we've been trained to think it's all about likes, it's all about how many shares you get, it's all about how big and how popular you can be. But you know what? If you're able to tell a compelling story of what's happening in your city, I mean, you could be the one that they go to rather than the local paper because they know the story's going to get out. You're going to have people wanting to bring information to you, and who knows where it goes from there? Because like with us, I mean, that's where it started. We started talking about our city, and then we found out things are the same everywhere, and it grew into this thing where we're talking about the whole state of Minnesota because we realized how similar these issues are across the state. But it's not about that. For us, it was about starting local, and we were content with that.
Well, and here's the thing. If you have somebody who's worried about likes and views and stuff, that is the person not only is wrong with podcasting, but is also wrong with television. It's the person who could be the most outrageous, say the most outrageous thing, and get away with it, be the craziest, and get the most attention, whether or not they're really affecting change or ultimately anybody's going to stick with them. I don't know that you build an audience by being the loudest in the room. So I think that the podcasts that start small and slowly gain are the ones that are going to be around in 5 or 10 years, versus the YouTube video of the monkey playing catch with bananas or something and getting a million hits.
Well, and that's a great point. It is about slow growth over time rather than making a big splash. And the people that built a career in music for longevity were able to do it over the long haul and be able to write hit after hit after hit.
And evolve. Their music evolved and changed over time.
Well, unless you're AC/DC. But,
okay.
But they have their
exceptions.
place,
They got their niche.
They did what they did well. But you're right. The people who were the one-hit wonders, the Come On Eileen. Now, some of them had great careers in Australia or Europe or this or that.
Or they were just a pretty face. And
they were one and done. And that's not what you want to do. You want to build something that is going to change your community over 1 year, 3 years, 10 years. And it can't be done by making it happen overnight. It's like when we started this podcast thing, and we were on episode 1, we're like, 100, whatever. But now here we are because we've just been consistent, and that's a huge part of it, is consistency. And we've just done it, and here we are, episode 100.
Yeah, and like we said, contract renewed. Our option was picked up. We're going to hit arbitration next year, so we'll see. We'll see about season 4. I'm sure it'll happen.
I'm holding out for the big money.
Well, I don't sign until you sign. So,
Okay.
We're going to do a Sandy Koufax, Don Drysdale here.
Okay.
That's a baseball 1966 Dodgers reference, by the way, for you people in San Francisco. Anyway, you've got. Ultimately, and I'm going to say this, too, to close 100 episodes. One thing you have to understand, too, and I have had so many people come up to me, and I haven't really told you this, but so many people come up to me and talk about our chemistry and about, how, and it's true. I want to share this with the audience. You and I don't have lines here. We don't rehearse.
No.
We independently research. We bring our own facts, our own stories, and somehow we're able to ad-lib a show. We do one take, and people say they don't believe that sometimes.
Really?
And I just tell them, look, when chemistry happens, and you and I have known each other for a long time now, but I wouldn't do this show by myself. I wouldn't do this show with anybody else. You get it. And
Right.
it's so
Likewise.
it's so difficult to find that. It's like it's almost like I don't want to get too sanguine about it, but it's almost like it was like the sun and the moon and the stars lined up to put us in this place to do it. I mean, as crazy as that might sound, I can't imagine somebody else running the controls other than you on the show. If you didn't want to do that, if you wanted to quit tomorrow,
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it either.
Wow.
The show's not about me and it's not about you.
Right.
As much as I try to make it about myself, it really isn't. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't know where to start. I
Yeah.
wouldn't know who to tell my bad jokes to or who'd stump me
Yeah.
on music and all the quirky things we do. We just hit them. I mean, one day you started with a song, and it's turned into stumping me on every episode. I mean, except for two.
Yes.
I got the Beatles and Eddie Money, right? Eddie Money a couple weeks ago. So I mean, but it's the greatest compliment I get from people is when they can listen to a show for an hour and a half and not shut it off, and at the end of it talk about, God, boy, those two guys, boy, they work well together. Boy, there's not 1 second of silence. There's not one, they just keep going and going and going, and it's a great compliment to hear. And I mean, again, to the audience, to the people who talk to me about that, when there's been a few that have, I mean, including my wife, who just says, geez, wow, you and Jason talk about that? Well, not really. We have a general plan when we go into an episode, but we don't,
Right.
rehearse what we're going to say. It just these brilliant things just come to us. But that's the best compliment that I get.
Yeah. Well, and it's like Bob said earlier. I mean, you got to be able to make your own way. You have to find yourself, and you only do that by doing it, and doing it over and over and over, and not relying on other people. Now, we co-host and we rely on each other, that way, but we have found our own niche, our own thing.
Innovators always top imitators.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't imitate anybody. When I sit here and talk, I'm not thinking about, how to put something the way I've heard somebody else say it.
Right.
It's the little quirks and things in a show are what make the show happen. And if the best advice to give is do not be an imitator. Don't be a mini this or a mini that or a wannabe that.
Yeah.
You've got to go your own way. And, we do the show where you, like I said, you stump me on the music. You open every show. You close every show. I've allowed you to do that for 100 episodes, and I'm going to allow you to do. It's in our contract that I allow you to do that again. But it's just, the best things just kind of happen over time. And one thing that I've been pleased at is how much better we are at this. Even though our early episodes were good, our last string of couple of months, I think, have been the best podcasts we've put together.
Yeah.
Remember, after early shows, we go, boy, that was good. That was fun. And I find myself having more fun with this every week. And like I said, the day this isn't fun anymore,
Yeah.
this is going to be fun, period.
Well, when we see wins happen from what we do, that's fun.
There's a great sense of accomplishment, and it just sort of justifies our hard work. So,
Right.
but I mean, that's just a big thank you to the audience, and Jay, to you, and to I would throw my wife on there too, who is extremely tolerant of all the time I spend doing this, and she's been terrific about it, even though I still thinks I'm half crazy, but
Half?
yeah. Well, I mean, she married me; she can't think I'm totally crazy.
That's true.
And it does take a lot. The consulting, the blogs, the shows. There's a lot that you do a lot. I mean, I should let the audience know that Jason's the one who puts the show together and edits and puts the music on and puts it out there and runs a lot of the social media. I mean, and you do a lot of, I think, thankless things here. So just so the audience knows that you put in so many hours to this and do all hooking up all these mixers or whatever cake mixer we have here.
Yeah.
You do a lot more work with that stuff than I do. So,
Well, thank you. I enjoy it. So, and thank you.
it's not work, is it?
No, it's really not. I mean, I could be sitting in an office waiting for a heart attack. So
Don't remind me of what I'm doing tomorrow, okay?
But most of all, above us thanking each other for the job that, what we each bring to the table, we want to thank you for listening. It has been 100 episodes of, just hearing good feedback, hearing constructive criticism, hearing, but it's made us better and it's challenged us. And, hearing our opponents tell us we're crazy, hearing our supporters cheer us on, it has been good. And, we are so thankful for everything that you guys have done to help promote the show, to help promote what we're doing in the state. And it's not what we're doing, it's what we're trying to help you guys do. It's what we're trying to help you guys do to save time in the education, to save time, because it's taken us 10 years to learn all this stuff, to save time in being able to go and win races, because it took us 3 election cycles, and we're seeing some of you do it and turn it around in a couple. You're allowing us to help you do that, and I'm thankful. So we'd love to come and speak at one of your functions somewhere in the state. We'd love to come and give one of our trainings on how to get involved, where to start, what kind of numbers do you need. We want you guys on Team 20K because we know that once we begin to see the scales tip a little bit, we're going to see the policies in the state tip a little bit, and it's going to be a little freer, a little easier to live. So with that, get a hold of us. You see anything screwy in your community, you want to volunteer for something, you want us out, COMMsolutionsMN@gmail.com. That is COMMsolutionsMN@gmail.com. And boy, we are raring to go for the next 100 episodes. This is only scratching the surface, like Andrew said. 100 in the bag. The next 100 are coming just as hard and heavy. So
get ready in the Podcast Hall of Fame for those tapes to be wheeled in.
Oh boy, I don't think we use tapes.
Well, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's a rock and roll. There's no Podcast Hall of Fame.
Not yet.
There may be in 30 years.
That's true.
It's possible.
Yeah, or it could be included in some broadcasters Hall of Fame. Who knows?
Get my speech ready.
Yeah.
Say a few words.
All right. You get it. You get it ready now. We're gonna go away and get our
4-7. No,
we're gonna go away and get our podcast episode 101 ready for you next week. So don't you go anywhere, because we're gonna be right back before you know it. God bless you guys and have a great evening, because we love you, Minnesota. Now it's your turn to get to work.
If I get too